You felt it before. That spark of connection. A look that lingers. A smile that slips in at the exact right moment. A phrase that feels as if it was carved out of your own thoughts and handed back to you. It feels genuine. It feels warm. It disarms you. But underneath, something is wrong. And before you can name it, before your instincts even rise, they already have what they came for. This isn't charm, it's calculation. The dark empath doesn't run after anyone. They don't beg for attention. They don't chase. They pull you in. They speak your tongue. They mirror your hidden wounds. They become the echo of your pain, while quietly tightening the frame around your mind. You don't notice the lock. You don't notice the cage. Not until you're inside, velvet-lined and sealed shut. They aren't careless like narcissists. They're colder, sharper, because they don't dismiss your humanity. They understand it. They see all of you and still decide to use you. This isn't a warning. This is an initiation. You will learn how to become what this world cannot defend against. A presence that soothes and then consumes. A smile that rescues and then reorients. Not through rage, not through cruelty, but through silence, through study, through flawless emotional aim. Because this world does not reward softness anymore. It does not protect sensitivity. Empathy, kindness, gentleness, once honored as strengths, are now handled like weaknesses. If you're someone who feels deeply, who sees through others, who listens with real presence, you're the one chewed up first. But what if that same depth was not a liability? What if it became your sharpest weapon? That is where the dark empath rises. Not as a manipulator, not as a predator, but as a survivor. Someone who bled too long, who carried too much, who finally stopped offering themselves up as a sacrifice. The dark empath moves through life like a living mirror. They see the cuts under every mask. They recognize the trembling fear beneath every false bravado. They can smell the emptiness behind the loudest boast. But they don't get dragged into the storm anymore. They don't collapse under the weight. They don't fall into the chaos. They use what they see as their shield. They don't exploit emotions. They outlast them. They absorb the world's storm in silence, then step into a room already knowing what everyone's hiding. And in a culture built to break the sensitive, that is the most terrifying kind of strength. You don't arrive here by accident. You arrive here because kindness failed, because truth got you exploited, because honesty almost destroyed you. So you stop explaining yourself. You stop raising your voice. You stop begging to be seen. You observe. You absorb. You adapt. You've taken control of your empathy, not to manipulate others, but to stop others from manipulating you. Because the more you felt, the more you suffered. And so you cut the cord. You stopped seeking to be understood. Now you understand everyone and trust no one. The dark empath isn't heartless. They've simply buried the parts of their heart that couldn't survive constant stabbing. And once you bury those pieces, you don't go back. You don't resurrect the innocent softness. You rise, not to dominate the world, but to move through it unbroken, untouchable. You don't announce the change. You don't post it online. You don't preach it out loud. You simply become inaccessible. That is the way the dark empath ascends. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Cold, beautiful clarity. You stop explaining your kindness. You stop defending your compassion. You stop handing out unlimited second chances just because you can see where their pain came from. One day you realize that feeling their pain doesn't mean you are required to carry it. That is the turning point. You've always seen people more clearly than they see themselves. Their joy, their lies, their loneliness. It's always been loud to you, even when buried under polite smiles. But before, that gift made you a target. You tried to fix, to save, to heal, to love without end. And they used it. Not because they were always evil, but because you were open, and they mistook your openness for weakness, until one day you didn't break, you hardened. That's when the transformation happened. That's when the empath became something sharper, quieter, more exact. That's when the dark empath was born. Not as a villain, not as the manipulator they fear, but as the survivor who no longer bleeds for anyone who wouldn't lift a finger for them. And it's that silence that terrifies people most. You stop talking so much. You start watching. You listen not to comfort, but to memorize. You turn into a strategist. You let people reveal themselves. You stop calling people out. You stop arguing. You stop chasing closure. You walk away. You don't chase answers. You end the chapter yourself. Now your radar is not to save, but to protect. You no longer waste your vision on fixing the broken. You use it to spot the liar before they finish their sentence. To know the betrayer before the smile fades. To sense flattery before it slides into your ears. You can walk into a room and immediately feel what everyone is hiding. You don't flinch. You don't react. You simply adjust. And that control, that precision, that's what makes you dangerous. Not because you play the game, but because no one else can play you anymore. You no longer crave approval. You don't hunger to be liked. You refuse to tear yourself apart just to belong. You belong only to yourself now. And the world despises that. Because most people are actors, addicted to attention, trapped by reaction, enslaved to their need for validation. But not you. You've trained yourself to breathe in silence, to stay calm when provoked, to walk away with dignity instead of clinging with desperation. And that is the ultimate threat. Because nothing terrifies manipulators more than a person who cannot be guilted, cannot be shamed, cannot be bribed with kindness. Someone who sees through the game and simply refuses to play. They'll call you cold. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. And they're right. You have. You stopped giving your soul away just to keep others comfortable. The dark empath does not use emotions to destroy. They use emotions to endure. They don't weaponize empathy. They wear it as armor. They still feel deeply, but only for those who've proven worthy. They still connect, but never at the cost of themselves. In a world that hunts the sensitive, becoming a dark empath is not about turning evil. It's about becoming immune to guilt, immune to manipulation, immune to noise. Once you reach that state, once you accept that not everyone deserves your light, you don't just survive. You move through the world like a shadow, untouchable, unshaken. Because nothing is more terrifying than someone who can feel everything and yet remain in total control. You're not heartless. You've simply stopped leaving your heart on the table for scavengers. You're not cold. You've simply stopped setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. But that's not how the world interprets it. When you were open, forgiving, endlessly available, they called you pure. When you gave them constant access to your time and your emotions, they called you noble. But the moment you shift, the moment you draw a line, the moment you stop explaining your no, suddenly you're arrogant, suddenly you're cruel, suddenly you've become too much. That is the paradox of the dark empath. You feel everything. You understand everyone. But no one truly understands you. And that's no accident. That's design. Because once you've been burned enough, you stop broadcasting your soul. You learn to scan the room without exposing yourself. You let others talk while you decode every pattern behind their words. You let them misinterpret you because their assumptions reveal more than your explanations ever could. They call you mysterious, distant, maybe even dangerous. Good. Let them. The less they understand, the more power you hold. Because real power doesn't live in being seen. Real power lives in being unreadable. The dark empath doesn't fit into any box. You're not a manipulator, but you're not naive. You're not cruel, but you won't tolerate disrespect. You're not loud, but your silence is deafening. You sit in circles where everyone is pretending to be confident, pretending to be happy, pretending to be in control, and you see through every layer. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to expose them. You simply let them unravel under the weight of their own facade. That's what makes you untouchable. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not scrambling to be liked. You're not desperate to heal every wound you see. You've shifted into a different game entirely, one they can't even perceive. It's not about domination. It's about liberation. You've freed yourself from the need to be understood. And in that freedom, their judgments can't touch you. Their praise can't move you. Their insults can't wound you. They never truly knew you anyway, and now they never will. Because the dark empath is unsolvable, a paradox in flesh, soft but unshakable, kind but unyielding, emotional yet precise. You walk alone, not out of hate, but because you finally understood. Not everyone deserves access to your presence. And in an age where everyone begs for validation, choosing solitude is an act of revolution. Let them call it arrogance. Let them whisper that you've changed. They're right. You have. You've changed in the most dangerous way possible. You feel everything, and you owe nothing. That's the core of your power. Most people think emotional intelligence makes you soft, that reading people makes you weak, that sensitivity ensures you'll be eaten alive. But they don't understand. In the hands of a dark empath, emotion is not a weakness. It is a weapon. You enter a room and your senses switch on. The way their eyes twitch, the way their laugh rings false, the way their smile strains. You don't just hear words. You hear the truth under the words. And that is the difference. You're not reacting. You're calculating. Most people stumble blindly into traps. You see the trap before it's even set. You see the betrayal before the handshake. You see the knife before the smile fades. That is emotional intelligence sharpened into survival. You're not playing games. You're protecting your peace. You're not paranoid. You're perceptive. What others dismiss as coldness is simply control. Those who call you too sensitive are the same ones who couldn't handle your insight. Those who say you've changed are the same ones who lost the privilege of your openness. And those who think they fooled you, you've been watching them unravel long before they knew. Your empathy is no longer a bridge. It is a fortress, a filter, a weapon of endurance. You are not heartless. Your heart's smart. You still feel, but you no longer let feeling drag you into ruin. You observe first. You allow people to show themselves. And when they think they've read you, you vanish from their story entirely. You don't beg to be seen. You choose who earns the right to see you. And in that choice lies your power. The dark empath doesn't need to manipulate because they already know how the story ends. They don't need to control others because they've mastered self-control. That is the most dangerous strength of all, because there comes a moment when the war is over. not because the world stopped attacking, but because you stopped reacting. You're not broken, you're not bitter, you're simply done. That is when the dark empath evolves from survivor into sovereign. You stop chasing people. You start chasing purpose. You stop begging for peace. You create it within. Your empathy no longer poisons you. It protects you. You stop bleeding to prove your worth. You stop handing out explanations like apologies. You stop walking into fire for people who wouldn't even step into rain for you. And in that silence, you discover freedom. Not loud freedom, quiet freedom, the kind that walks away without announcement. No explanations, no closure, just absence. You learn to smile without trust, to listen without absorbing, to love without losing yourself. That is the final form of the dark empath, not the villain they whisper about, not the manipulator they project onto you, but the one person who refuses to be played. You don't expose people anymore. You let them expose themselves. You don't fight for your seat at the table. You walk in, and presence alone silences the room. They feel it, the quiet authority, the unreadable gaze, the weight of someone who sees everything and says nothing. You're no longer an open book. You're a locked manuscript. And only those willing to bleed, to earn, to prove, are given even a glimpse of your truth. Most won't. And you don't care, because your world is now quiet. And in that quiet, you see everything, you hear everything, you know everything. That is why you're untouchable. You don't live for their approval. You don't bend for their applause. You exist on your own terms, with empathy sharpened into intuition and silence honed into power. They can't understand you. They can't control you. They can't even reach you. You've become what the world fears most. Someone who once cared deeply, but no longer needs anyone to breathe. You are the ghost they can't haunt, the heart they can't break, the soul they can't seduce. They told you kindness was strength. They told you empathy would save the world. They told you that goodness would be rewarded. But you lived long enough to see the lie. The world doesn't protect the sensitive. It crucifies them. It doesn't reward the pure. It uses them. It doesn't shield the kind. It bleeds them dry. You tried it their way. You gave. You forgave. You stayed loyal, even when it killed you. And all it earned was betrayal, disappointment, and loneliness. So you stopped being their hero. You became your own weapon. That is the dark empath. Not evil, not manipulative, not cruel, but strategic, aware, unshakable. You didn't lose your empathy. You mastered it. You still feel everything. You just obey nothing. You don't waste emotion anymore. You don't explain yourself anymore. You don't apologize for being strong. You don't need to. Because real power isn't noise. It's leverage. It's presence. It's silence. And the dark empath has all three. You don't beg for attention. You command it. You don't chase. You attract. You don't cry for closure. You write the ending yourself. And when you walk away, it's final. This isn't cruelty. This is immunity. You can still love. You can still care. But only with razor boundaries. You can still feel, but you no longer collapse beneath feeling. You've taken your wounds, your silence, your depth, and turned them into armor. You are the wolf among sheep, blending in until the moment you choose to strike. And by then, it's too late. The world will never fully understand you. They'll mislabel you, misjudge you, misinterpret your silence. And that is fine. You don't need their understanding. You don't need their validation. You are not here to kneel. You are not here to fit in. You are here to stand, to survive, to rule yourself. That is the paradox they will never solve. You feel everything, and yet nothing controls you. You see everything, and yet no one sees you. You care deeply, but never blindly again. That is the power of the Dark Empath, and that is why you are unstoppable. So if this resonates, remember, this is not the end of your story. It's the beginning. Subscribe. Share this with the quiet one ready to rise, because the world is about to learn the most dangerous truth of all. A person who feels everything and yet bows to nothing. You are the Dark Empath, and you were built for this.